Brent, thank you for joining us. I wanted you here for two reasons. And just reading your stuff, I became a big fan. And those two reasons are, first, you talked about AI as boosting productivity, absolutely. But you also said it may, in fact, broaden inequality in the US and elsewhere. The second reason was that you said, while it can pose a labor market shock for sure, it's kind of a systems challenge for us. Can we coordinate action to address the change that it represents, that it introduces? So thank you for agreeing to come.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, I think we start off with a mentee question. How do you use AI at your company or your organization? Glorified Google, okay. Personal workflow automation, all right. Competitive analysis or marketing. And business process redesign, lagging. Are you surprised by any of this?
That is about what I would have that's about what I would have expected. Yeah,
Okay.
Not surprised.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Okay, nor am I. Well, let's get going. I've got a series of questions I wanted to ask Brett that we've been talking about, and it's just the beginning of what I hope is a conversation with the room, which is what Brenda's asked to do, and I think would be great. All right, so let's start. So Brent, in your work, you often argue that AI isn't simply destroying jobs, but reorganizing work at the task level. For leaders in the National Capital Region, what's the most important shift they should understand about how work is actually changing?
I think the most important thing from really an organizational standpoint, it could be business, it could be government, it could be education, is, and we've talked about this, that there's this idea, I think, that we focus too much on skills. We've got our microscope and we're looking at skills and we're asking which skills are going to change. And I think that's fundamentally a backward way of looking at this. The way that major technology shocks work is they work from the outside in, right? So the outside in this case is, the competitive environment that businesses are in, and the advantages that accrue to first movers in adoption or adaptation to new technology. As the first movers, and they're typically larger organizations because it takes capital and it takes other resources for businesses to make these kinds of changes. So the larger firms will begin to change the way that they do business, the way that they produce whatever it is that they're producing, and that will give them a lead relative to their competitors in the market. Those competitors do not sit still. They begin to adapt. And that's what drives change through the business down to the skill level, right? So it isn't something that we are able to forecast. That's another kind of misconception, that with enough information, we can tell you what kinds of skills are going to be necessary. You will know it when you see it, and you will not know it until you see it. So that's a huge factor here. If I had to say who in this room knows the most about the future of work, it's probably the CEOs, the business leads, the organizational heads, who they may not realize they know, but they have the most access to the information that we need in order to help provide guidance to workers, students and workers, about the jobs of the future.
Move on to my second question. You've written that our biggest risk isn't mass unemployment, but institutional inertia. Kind of speaks to that first point. When you look at the DC region's workforce systems, higher ed, federal hiring, credentialing, where do you see the biggest mismatch with how AI-driven labor markets actually function?
I mean, I hate to repeat myself, but I do think that what I frequently say to audiences is there's nobody coming to save you, right? You are going to have to work this out not on your own, but take ownership of building the solutions to the challenge. And I think that everybody is kind of waiting for somebody to tell them what to do when it comes to AI. That goes right down to the individual level. It's, you know, your teams are waiting for you to tell them what to do. The boards are waiting for the CEO to make a decision. Everybody's waiting on everybody else. And the reality is that for this transition to be as effective as possible, we need kind of permissionless experimentation and encouragement to our teams to actually pick up and use the technology, because that's where the solutions are going to come from. AI is a remarkably easy technology to use in many ways because it has the ability to explain itself in real time. You don't have to sit in a class. In fact, I would argue that maybe sitting in a class is second or third best way of learning about AI. And so there needs to be, I think, within organizations, the idea of sandboxes where we are really encouraging people to come and try, and then to share what they're learning, and to share ideas about how this technology might be applied in our particular, whatever our particular context is. That's where the big shifts within your organizations and your practices are going to occur, or at least it's where you're going to identify what's possible. Because there aren't enough consultants in the world, right, to come around and teach everybody. And actually AI is its own consultant. So that's what I would recommend, is stop waiting. Nobody's coming to rescue you. You're going to have to do this for yourself and start thinking creatively about strategies that you can use. And if you don't have any ideas, guess what? Ask the AI. The AI will help you develop the strategy.
Not to be too self-interested, but who does the CEO go to? I mean, what's been successful in examples you've seen? Do they go to the board? Do they go, you talked about consultants, which strikes me as perhaps not the ideal place, but you know, what's been the experience you've seen?
So I have not been that up close to the actual, you know, sitting and listening to boards or sitting and listening to CEOs talk about this. I think one thing that I have noticed is that this usually starts, the transformation usually starts at the very top. And it usually starts with what's the single most annoying, repetitive, mundane task that a CEO is asked to do over and over and over again. It's important, but it's boring, okay? Think about that universe of tasks, not just for the CEO, but for yourself as well. What is that thing that you hate doing? Or the thing that you just have a lot of it to do? And ask, especially if it's something that you end up doing more than once, start looking for those things, because that's where AI really shines right now, is in taking friction out of systems. And so identifying the things that are kind of troublesome to you is often a very good place to start. And that begins with the CEO, I think, or executive director, whoever's at the top of the org chart, really reflecting on their own work and saying, I know I could be doing more if I had more time. I've taken on this as a personal mission, my own work, and I will tell you that workflow automation will give you back hours and hours and hours out of your week. It also requires an investment of time, so I don't want to undersell that. It's not coming to you baked, but the ingredients are all there.
I'm going to swing to the other side of the spectrum and ask you about entry-level access to jobs. If entry-level tasks are increasingly automated or augmented, discuss what replaces them as legitimate pathways for learning, signaling competence, and upward mobility.
Yeah, it's crazy times for the newly minted bachelor's degree holder. This has been the pathway that we have for decades told people this is the pathway into the middle class. Get your BA, get something that sounds like it's going to help you easily connect to the labor market. Here's the educational input, here's the career outcome. And I think that is going away. So in terms of pathways for people to sort of establish that connection to the labor market, what I see going on, and I think this is a trend, is that companies, organizations are radically expanding internship programs. Increasing Shopify is a good example of this. Their headcount as a company has gone from 11,000 to 8,000 over the last 2 years. So they are slimming down. The technology is driving a lot of efficiency. There's that effect is going on. But as their headcount has dropped, they've gone from 75 internships to over 1,000. All right. Now, why is that? I can promise you it is not an altruistic instinct. It gives them access to a very broad labor pool that they can then choose from to replace workers that leave or retire. But it also does deliver value even to those who aren't hired for a full-time position, right? It gives them actual experience of work in the workplace, doing real work, and it allows them to then take that as a credential out into the marketplace. And I think that is really the future. Right now, it seems to be the emerging future for entry level.
Unfortunately, I think we're seeing, we, as a business, we've seen the power of that, but we're seeing the states, both the Commonwealth of Virginia and Maryland, really double down on that. I think they've gotten that message for sure. Well, I'm going to talk a bit more about that regional leadership in the next questions. If you were advising a coalition of major employers, universities and public agencies, the crowd assembled here in the National Capital Region, what is the one thing they should stop doing and the one thing they should start doing to prepare workers for AI-driven change?
So I think they should, if they are resisting, resistance is futile. Stop resisting, This is happening. There's no going back. We can slow it down, but that will only hurt us in the long run. We can't stop it. So if you've got the red thing on your, you need to think about whether that is the right stance for this future that we're moving into. It's hard. It's scary. It is going to be difficult. This is not easy, but it doesn't get any easier if you resist. The thing that you should start doing, I think I'll just go back to what I said, is you need to make AI your friend and encourage the people who work with you to make it your friend.
Finally, if we fast forward 5 years and say the DC region got this right, what would be visibly different about how people enter, move through, and advance in the workforce?
I think if we saw career pathways that were genuinely skill-driven, less credential-driven, more skill-driven, I think that would be a major step forward for everybody. We've talked a lot about skills-based hiring. The unfortunate effect right now of AI is that it's moving us backwards on skill-based hiring. Any of you who've chatted with your HR leads recently know that you're being flooded with lots of applications from people who aren't really qualified. And so right now it's having a negative effect on skills-based hiring because people are just reverting to the credential. If we can figure out ways to allow people to demonstrate their ability, their competency as part of the recruitment process, really demonstrate, we're moving out of tell and into show. Show me what you can do. I think that would be a major advance for the region and much more democratic, small d democratic way of accessing talent.
Fabulous. Well, I'm going to stop my questions and open up the conversation to the room. So if you've got your hands up, get mics to run there. Okay, the cube, the mic cube. I love this cube.
Oh, hello. There you go.
Hello, Roberto.
Hi,
Your
Roberto.
name and ask your question. Hey, Roberto.
So I heard something mentioned about CEOs probably having a great knowledge of the future of workforce. And I asked AI, what is the biggest priority for a CEO of a major corporation? The answer was the biggest priority for a CEO of a major company is ensuring the long-term health and value of the organization. And if that is the case, we're talking about the bottom line. And if adapting AI helps the bottom line and lays off massive amounts of people, how do you consider the human impact when you're making those decisions?
Yeah, I think that any business that looks at this as a labor substitution mechanism, and that's their main focus, I'm going to capture that value. I'm going to lay off a bunch of people and capture that value by substituting AI, is making a pretty big mistake. It robs you of a pipeline of people that you will need 10 years from now if you lay them all off. It's not really in your business interest. Now, the pressure pushing against that is actually the market. You know, the stockholders, for instance, in major corporations want to see the margins maintained. And so businesses are going to have to balance this, because if they go too far one way or the other, they put themselves, their businesses in danger, I think.
Next.
Hello,
I'm sorry. One back here.
representing Cyber Maryland from Maryland Department of Labor. My question is, if AI is making changes as wide and as fast as we think it would be, what that means is that the policy prescription that we have from the government cannot just be one time. For example, the internship example, like Maryland, we support internships a lot. Does that mean that we have to support internship multiple times in a row instead of one-time internship and get people in the pathway?
Mm-hmm.
Changes is happening too fast. When we look at AI literacy a couple years ago, it changed again right now, right? In on that and what the government should be doing, because we can't possibly be investing the same thing over and over time.
Yeah, no, it's I feel you on this. I mean, in my own work, I'm coming to the realization that the papers that I took 6 months to write 8 years ago, I can now do in a month or less. And it needs to be a month, because whatever I write will be out of date before I get it into print. So it's a huge challenge, the pace of change. I think what I'm suggesting about the internship example is that that's the current state, right? That's the adaptation at the moment. And there are going to be a lot more adaptations that come along that are going to be technologically driven and technologically supported. It's not going to be, one and done. We were never in that position of being one and done. Business has always been competitive, and it transforms all the time. We've just increased the pace 100x.
I also used AI to ask the questions in the AI conference last night. So what durable human capabilities, and I work at Georgetown, so maybe even soft skills, do you believe will become more, not less valuable in an AI-augmented workplace? And how should universities and employers be redesigning development pathways around them? And I know you touched on internships, but what else?
The bottom line here is that, as I said, for years we've been talking to people about credentials, about skills and credentials, and that's the mechanism that we have to certify knowledge and skill. Okay, those narrower technical skills are increasingly less valuable because AI is taking over more and more. of anything that, like I said, anything that is repeatable, expensive, task-oriented is being automated. What's left is actually the really interesting stuff. It's forward-looking rather than looking at tasks. It's forward-looking in kind of judging and appraising AI outputs. So that calls for a very different kind of skill set that doesn't break down into credentials very easily. And it's so important that we need to recognize this as a life cycle issue. It's not just for college students or even for high school students. It's really all the way down to pre-K and kindergarten. We need to be developing the kinds of non-cognitive skills that make people good learners. And that is very different than teaching them even how to write or read. It is an openness and a receptivity to learning. That sounds very vague and very general, and I apologize for this, but I did not write the rules. To the extent that we are building good learners, we're going to have people who can adapt to change. To the extent that we are not building good learners, we are hurting ourselves, and we're hurting those people. These children, young people in particular. I mean, early childhood education is workforce development. Trauma prevention is workforce development. Family structure is workforce development. It's not just those things. It's not just workforce development. It's also about what kind of society we want to live in, but it does have a direct bearing on preparation for work.
I'm going to go with one last question.
Hey everyone, I'm Will at Northern Virginia Community College. And earlier you mentioned using AI to remove friction from workforce processes and at businesses. And that's probably great for businesses, but anyone involved with either parenting or education knows that friction is often where the most important learning takes place. So how do we square technology that exists to essentially reduce friction or eliminate friction with the idea that that friction is going to be what teaches people to be those creative thinkers?
Yeah, I think it's a really great way of framing the question. Friction is the place where we learn. What we want to move is that point of friction to the highest value, right? So if the friction point is the enrollment process, if the friction point is grading, if the friction point is equalizing access to getting into the learning environment, those are the things. That's the kind of friction we want to remove. We don't want to remove all friction because it is so important to learning. My view is that there's plenty of friction in life, and our immediate response should be to ask, is that necessary friction, or can it be reduced or removed to improve the learning process in the case of community colleges? I'm not a community college expert. Good friends with Ann Kress. I hear from her a lot about what's going on and how excited and worn out she is at the same time. I don't have the answers. I think that it's really a matter of asking the questions right now. Where does the unnecessary, unhelpful, counterproductive friction exist in our system?
I think we're going to have to hold it there. But I will encourage you guys, we're going to talk about this later, but there'll be a website post-event where hopefully we as a community can engage one another in a lot of these questions. Hopefully Brent will join us, but certainly it'll be one where we can exchange some of these thoughts and continue the conversation. So thank you, Brent, so much for your time.
Thank you.